Hi, Dennis Toffer from Optimi here. So we've identified the technical requirements for communicating with LLMs, and we've identified now the way to understand what resonates with customers, and how to do customer research so that you understand which questions are most important to customers and what resonates with them. What follows from this now is the AI content strategy and framework. It's important to understand that all AI systems rely on the same fundamental content principles. Content needs to be structured, authoritative, concise, factual, machine-readable, and if brands don't supply this, they lose visibility by default. So structured means that your content needs to be structured in a certain way. Structured means that it's schema 2.0, right? It's where content is structured so that machines can take it and parse it, summarize, synthesize, and give it out to a prompt that's being asked. You need to be authority within your categories. You need to be concise, clear, concise, factual. Don't make stuff up. Here, marketing needs to be careful. LLMs really don't like they don't like emotions. They like neutral tone of voice, factual, to the point. Why does this product serve the customer best? Why is this product the best for the customer? Why is the service a best fit for category X, Y, or Z? And then machine readable content. How do machine read that content and interpret it? So the framework we use for content is as follows. You optimize brand baseline. This is really looking at the basics of the brand. We'll dive into it now. Then category ownership. Which categories does a brand want to own and take ownership of and dominate? Within the category, how easy is it for LLMs to extract answers and to give these answers to customers when they're asking it? Authority and validation signals. Once you've built your authority and you've dominated the category, what signals does LLM use to validate what you're saying is the truth? And how do we know where to put our content around on the web to increase that validation signals, and to positively optimize and influence them? Then, very importantly, frequently asked questions and the retrieval around that frequently asked questions. How does that work in the content strategy? Translation strategies, how does that fit in? How do we identify AI discovery surfaces around content? How do we go live and publish? A bit of tactics and strategy around that. And then how do we measure and test? Establish your company baseline, right? This is your summarization layer. Take these and fill it into ChatGPT. This is how ChatGPT sees you, interprets you, and how it portrays you to customers asking about you. Who is your brand name? What does your brand name do? What business problem does your brand name solve for? Who is your brand name products and services ideally for? Can LLMs list your mission, vision, countries and languages you operate in, contact details, management bios, that type of thing? Think of a business profile, and it's a bit more extended business profile, but that's what you start off with in the framework. Then you look at the categories that you want to take ownership of. And remember the customer research that we've done, right? Now you're going to write evergreen content, long form content, and short form content. So what's the difference? Evergreen content is content that will be relevant between now to 3 years' time. Typical customer key questions, issues, pain points they have, and give me more of. I want to understand this better. Is this fit for me? Jobs to be done, that type of thing. That's evergreen content. And it needs to be aligned with the qualitative data and robust customer research that's been done. This evergreen content can be long and deep. The more, the better, because it's gonna sit on the internet for a long time. It needs to be crafted. There needs to be real depth of understanding and consideration around it. Long form content then is similar to evergreen, but it takes concepts within the evergreen content and do a deep dive into that. Let me give you an example. Assume you are a medical aid company and your category customer are couples with children, newborn babies and small children and so on, and they're looking to either switch medical aid because their situation has changed, or then to add their children to their existing medical aid, and they start researching on that. What's key to them is, let's assume dental is key to them, right? There's dental issues, DNA in the family, and that's something that's really key to them. Your evergreen content then will address this specific category and the customer research that you've been doing, and then talk about how dental is important and what they can expect to pay and what's covered and what's not covered, and it's detail, right? The long form content then can take the dental issue to the next levels. You can do further deep dives into it, linking dental health to children, dental checkups, dental awareness. All of that can form part of the long form content, which then links to evergreen content. Right, then short form content is derived from both evergreen and long form content. Short form content are typically question, answer. It's accurate, factual, neutral tone answers to evergreen question. Typically a question would be a sentence of, say, 10 to 15, 20 words, and the answer should be between 40 to 90 words. It's extracts that LLMs can quickly grasp, synthesize, and put onto their systems. And short form content should be written within evergreen and long form content, because evergreen and long form content should mirror the short form content and vice versa. So you would write a piece, right? You'd write that, and you'd make sure that there's short form content within that piece, FAQs, and you take that short form content and put it onto your website, onto your machine-readable files in the back of your website, as well as areas on the web which you know will influence LLMs to mirror those concepts. And that's your content ownership strategy. Bear in mind the following structures and content types. So LLM loves questions and answers, brevity, hierarchy. It's a very logical system. So if you can show it some form of hierarchy, and logical flow, they love that. Lists, tables, comparison tables. Combine these two, and tell a customer why they should consider you as an option for buying. LLM loves these stuff. Definitions and summaries, those two go nicely together. Obviously, questions and explanations. Schema markup we've talked about, metadata for videos. Consistency in terms of brand of tone, use your voice of customer, bring that into your consistency when you structure your data, structure your content. Then comparison, and one thing that I need to say is neutrality. LLMs love concise, factual, to the point content that's neutral, not emotional. LLMs do not understand emotions. They love neutrality. And by the way, if they see social media comments as neutral, slightly positive, they see it as positive. So neutrality to them is important. And then evergreen content types we've talked about. Some considerations that you need to be aware of. Have we mapped our knowledge graphs? So what is a knowledge graph? Knowledge graphs are concepts, themes, and frameworks that is related to the category that you want to dominate for. Let me give you an example. If you talk about insurance, I have a 4x4 that I need to insure. I've just bought it. It needs to be insured. What is the knowledge graphs around that? Okay. It is a vehicle. Do I use this vehicle every day, or do I use it only for leisure? That's the first knowledge graph that is linked to that. Who's going to drive this vehicle? Is it going to be me, my wife? Is it going to be children? Is it going to be family members? Where is this vehicle parked most time of the day? Is it within a secure environment? Is it outside? How does the outside look like? Is it a dodgy zone? Is it a zone where it's safe and so on? What else can we associate with this knowledge graph? Well, what do I, as a potential customer, need to do to acquire insurance on this? Can I just quickly tell my insurance company via email, hey, put this on, here's the details? What is the details around that's needed? Do I need to take pictures of a photograph of the vehicle and show that it's new and which dents already exist on that vehicle? So those are the type of things that form a knowledge graph that customers would talk about and think about. And I've sketched one from a insurance point of view, but you would need to think of one from a customer point of view. And again, customer research, knowing your customer intimately, is where the gold is, where you would find that LLMs not only love your content, but they would prefer you because you understand your customers well. Does a single ever page cover what it is that the concept that you have, why this concept matters? Is there trade-offs, comparisons, and how is this implemented? If it's a software system, B2B, or if something needs to be implemented on a client side, those are the things that you need to think of. Would an AI system interpret our content as objective, educational, or promotional? Really important. If you can manage that the content is interpreted as objective and educational, then AI systems will prefer you because it sees you as the authority. Do we structure content based on time to token requirements? So what is time to token? Time to token is the energy requirements that a large language model needs to interpret content, synthesize it, and provide a clear and concise answer to a prompt, to a question, to a prompt for a customer. All right. So time to token works on 0.75 tokens per word, which means you can write around about 750 words per 60 seconds. Think about content in terms of chunks. How can LLMs take this chunk of content and synthesize it easily into a logical, concise way to answer the question as accurately as possible? And because LLMs work on big data centers, they are really focused on time to token. So your content needs to understand time to token, to structure it in such a way that it's easy and digestible for LLMs. Then lastly, consider the feedback loop. You've experienced this. You ask an LLM, you give it a prompt, you ask it a question, it comes back with an answer, it gives you options, you dive deeper, deeper, deeper. By the third, fourth answer, it's like an LLM kind of goes off the rails. And the reason why they do it, again, time to token. LLMs do not store the first or the second prompt because it takes memory space and it takes energy, electrical energy, that is, and that's expensive for them. So they answer you, they go deeper and deeper, but they forget what it is that you asked. And so in your content, you need to strategize on how you're going to answer your customer's question that resonates and matters most to them in such a way that you answer tier 1, 2, and 3 questions, but again go back to the original or the second question so that you don't miss your customers in that loop. Really important, right? Or then somehow at least have a link to your website and ensure that you are cited and mentioned here with a link to your site. Okay. Answer extractability. Provide concise and neutral 49 to 90 word answers that can be directly cited by LLMs. How do you do this? You look within your category for commercial intent, informational authority, and competitive positioning. Have we here, if someone asks who's the best providers in this category, who is the cheapest, who's the best, who provide me the best value, what in that category are the most important questions that customers will be asking? Are we mentioned, and how can we write a question around this and give an answer? And not only one question, but 2 or 3 that are similar to this with the same answer. How can we then load that up from a commercial intent perspective onto the back end of our JSON files, onto our content, frequently asked questions, onto our web and social media ecosystem, right? The same with the narrative control. When AI explain how does this work, whether it's your category or subcategory within your category, we need to dominate that framework. So we need to explain to LLMs how this works, and again, put that content on your site, back end of your website system, as well as out there on social media, places where you can influence LLMs. Then competitive positioning. Have we benchmarked our AI responses against our top competitors within this category? How do we dominate? How can we dominate? How do we write content around that? So we've talked about authority, but how does authority and validation signals work, and how can we influence it? And this is more about structured data, which we've touched on. quantified results, comparison, and clear expertise attribution. So, authority. Authority provides structured data, quantified results, comparison, and clear expertise and authority. Your content needs to be structured, quantified, you need to show comparisons. Here's something like awards, something like being cited on an industry platform that is widely recognized. Being cited on a third-party trust source like Trustpilot would show your authority, right? And then validation. LLMs will show us through systems which platforms they use to validate our authority and our content. And now we need to ask, in that validation, does our content read like marketing or more like evidence? Do we promote ourselves more than we help and guide the customer in their buying decisions? Because LLMs will cite us more if we're helpful, if we provide content that is truthful, concise, and resonates with our customers. The marketing part of this comes on the back end of providing customers with long-form, evergreen content that helps them in their buying decisions. Once you dominate that category, then you can start putting your brand to that. Then how does that retrieval design and the content looks like? Is the clarity in questions, is the questions clear? Have we distilled the customer questions to its essence without losing context, giving us an opportunity to have a clear, concise answer that will resonate with our ideal customer? Is these questions and answers easily retrievable by bots and AI systems? Do we validate the answers across the web and social media platforms? Remember what I said. Take those FAQs and short 40 to 90 words answers, work them through on your content on your site, but also go out on the web, post them so that LLMs recognize and kind of dominate and allow you to dominate within that category, right? So translation, I'm briefly going to touch on this, but translation then takes this content framework, translate it into other languages. But what you need to keep in mind is which language, which location, and very importantly, is there nuances and context. This is really important. You need to get this right. So you can't take your customer research and just translate it. If your product and services is within a market that is different culturally, different geographically, where the languages are different. There's a difference between South American Spanish and European Spanish, for instance, right? There's nuanced differences in the culture and the language. Your research needs to show that, because if it doesn't, then you're not closely aligned to your customer within that region. And I almost want to say you need to do customer research within each region to understand those nuances. And then you need to identify the discovery surfaces. Which platforms outside of your web and machine systems does influences LLMs the most? Overall, speaking very broadly, it would be Reddit, it would be YouTube. I would also put things in like Wikipedia, as well as certain search engines for certain LLMs. Obviously, Gemini and Google are linked, but then what I've heard in the market is Bing and Chat are linked. So if you can influence then your Bing optimization, I would really look at FAQs and how I can influence Bing, so Chat picks that up, right? So each language model then selects its data source, um, and there's alignment between the large language models and some search engines. Um, I wouldn't um, I wouldn't force my strategy on this, right? I wouldn't have this lead my strategy, but I would be cognizant of it. So do a matrix map. Where are we doing marketing on social media, for instance, and platforms outside our owned assets? Um, and which platforms do LLM tell us where we can have the most influence, and map those, right? Maybe we're marketing on platforms that LLMs do not see as important for our categories to dominate on. And then AI discovery, surfacing, publishing plan. Which platforms do you want to target? How would you approach them? There's a different way of approaching Wikipedia versus Reddit versus YouTube and the rest. And each platform you would need to think about strategically, because if you get it wrong, then it will influence your large language model validation process. Now go live and publish. Approach. Decide what content you want to focus in the short, medium, long term for. Evergreen, long form content, short form content, and the sequencing you want to do. Now, really, really important here is speed and timing. Remember, LLMs love content. They are content hungry, especially content written from human sources. So think about how you're going to launch this content to dominate a category. Understand your sales cycle. Do you want to dominate for a quarter? Do you want to dominate for a year, 2 years? Do you go slow burning or fast execution? How much resources do you have in terms of content, strategy, writing, all of that? How does this fit in with other parts of marketing, legal, product launches, category, and so on? And this is where you decide that approach. Okay. KPIs we use, obviously brand validations and mentions. If a brand mention you, then they list you. If they cite you, there's a link to your asset, like a website or app. The business profile, what is your summary layer look like? The contact details, bios, and locations. Content citations, citing mentions of evergreen, long form, and short form content. FAQs, do we dominate in the category on FAQs, commercial and informational? Do we control that narrative? Is there a gap analysis? And where's that gap and have we filled that gap? What is that KPI? Then brand reputation and revenue, track revenue and conversions rate linked to LLM channels. So those are the KPIs broadly that I would use when doing a content framework. Let's just move back a bit. If you do robust customer research, you understand what resonates to your ideal customer. You understand their pain points, you understand anxieties, fears, cognitive friction, how your value proposition aligned to that, plus, very importantly, the questions, prompts that customers will be asking. And you can write content and answer that in an authoritative, clear, concise manner. And you understand how machines think, what to do to help them to understand your content and to know that you're there and what categories you dominate, then your inclusion in LLMs is almost guaranteed, right? Okay, one other factor, your validation methodologies and platforms also need to be in place. But think about it. Your customers have a certain question, you know what that is, you answer that. Why would LLMs not cite you, mention you, allow you to dominate a category, right? All of those planets are now aligned, and therefore guaranteed inclusion is guaranteed, right? Because you've done your homework, you know the technicalities that you need to adhere to, and you've created a content framework and written content that aligns to qualitative research around your customer. So that is the content framework and strategy that we use for our customers, so that they can get cited, mentioned, and dominate categories within LLMs that resonate with their customers and that allows them to be the dominant player within the LLM ecosystems.